The video check 1 2 1 2 check 1 2 1 2 check. Yo, it's your boy Packer from the Rumble Room. Trying to get into a little discussion right now. The video is titled Universalism versus Relativism and the Notions of Sin and Righteousness. That's Universalism versus Relativism and the Notions of Sin and Righteousness. Okay? All right. So lately there's been a pretty hotly debated topic. Sin and righteousness, what is it? Right? We have the scriptures, 1 John, establishing sin, a definition for sin, and Deuteronomy 6:25, a definition for righteousness. Now, depending on what side of the conversation you're on, you're going to get some different takes on the whole on the scriptures, right? For Hebrews, we believe in the continuity of the Mosaic covenant, the covenant that was established at Sinai, and we believe that when I say believe in the continuity, we believe that it extends into the time period that is written about in the New Testament narrative, the time period that's written about in your New Testament writings. Okay, so we believe that the Mosaic covenant extends into the New Testament narrative. So that means the Mosaic covenant law did not only exist and was enacted during the time of the law and prophets, before the advent of Christ, before the death of Christ, but also after the death of Christ, the death and resurrection and ascension of Christ. Okay. Christians argue that after the death, resurrection, and ascension of Christ, all of that changed. The law was done away with. They cite Hebrews and Paul and to make the case. But when Israelites argue that when they cite 1 John 3:4, that says, "Whosoever committeth sin transgresses also the law, for sin is the transgression of the law." When Hebrews cite that, when Israelites cite that to Christians, Christians make the case that, sin, the idea of sin existed before the Mosaic covenant law. Okay? Christians say sin existed before the Mosaic covenant law. So they use 1 John 3:4. Well, they deny the argument of Hebrews, saying, no, when John is speaking of the law, it's not regarding the Mosaic covenant law. It doesn't. They don't really, many times they won't say what law it is, or if they do, they'll say it's the law of Christ, which they cite passages of scripture that aren't even commands. They'll cite the Beatitudes, all right, or they'll sort of piece together the commands that Christ gave in order to say, so as to say, the law in John 3, 1 John 3:4, it's not talking about the Mosaic law. It's talking about the commands, the specific and particular commands that Christ gave during his earthly ministry. But Israelites argue that the Messiah was a teacher of the Mosaic law. Okay, so what I want to do is sum up the argument Well, we just really kind of summed up the argument, like kind of like the dialogue. All right. But we'll sort of delve into their rationale a little bit. Christians, when they argue and say that sin existed before the Mosaic Law, and thus John is not meaning to define sin in terms of the Mosaic Law, they are pushing for a universal definition of sin. See, sin can't only mean transgressing the law, because sin existed before the Mosaic Law, which is right. Sin, people were sinning before the birth of Abraham, before the birth of Isaac and Jacob. They were sinning. Okay? But what did it mean to sin for them? Was it that of the Mosaic Law, some semblance of it, or was it a different law? Some say it was the Noahide law, the laws that were given to Noah. They sinned according to the laws that were given to Noah. So before I really kind of go in too deep about the respective arguments of Israelites and Christians, I want to get some terms on the table first, so that everybody is up on board with the language I'll be using, because this is essentially a very philosophical argument. So there's some philosophical jargon that you'll need to know in order to really kind of stay abreast of things. It's nothing too technical, right? Nothing too technical. The terms we'll be looking at is universal and relative. Okay? Universal and relative. We'll also be looking at some definitions of the definition of righteousness and sin as a secular from Google Dictionary. All right, and then we'll bring it back full circle to our biblical dictionaries, and then we'll kind of go further from there. So let's look at universal. When we talk about sin being a universal all right, here we go. All right, so let's talk about universal, and then we'll think about what it means for sin to be a universal idea. Okay, universal. Okay, of affecting or done by all people or things in the world, or in a particular group, applicable to all cases. Okay, and you can see some of the adjectives that's given: general, ubiquitous, comprehensive, common, omnipresent, all-embracing, all-inclusive, all-round, across the board, global, worldwide, international, widespread, blanket, sweeping, rampant. So you get the idea. All right. In terms of logic, it says denoting a proposition in which something is asserted of all class. So a universal idea. Speaking of universal ideas, let's think of some universal ideas. Universal idea is that love is pretty universal. The idea of love is it's all inclusive. It's worldwide. Every nation or culture has a notion of love. It's a universal notion. Okay. Linguistics, denoting over or relating to grammatical rule, set of rules, other than its found language. It's not really applicative to our discussion. Okay, universal, the noun, a person or thing having universal effect, currency or application. So if we think of currency, a one world currency, all right? if we think of in philosophical terms, a term or concept of general application. So we're talking about sin. Is sin generally applicative? Does every society have the same idea of sin? Does every religion? If we talk about more secular terms, right and wrong. Does every culture across the world have the same idea about what's right and wrong? Are there differences? Is every idea in every culture the same as how about this? Is every rule, every cultural rule in one set of cultural laws the same in one country as it is in another country? Linguistics, universal grammatical rule or universal feature, and then we got some etymological, like a little flow chart here. So if we think of sin in terms of the Bible, is it universal? Is sin in the Mosaic Law the same as sin in the Noahide laws? Is it exactly the same? Were the same set of laws translated to the Mosaic Law? Was the law that was given to Adam the same as the Mosaic Law? One recent conversation I had with Matt Salih was, were the laws for angels the same as the laws for Israel in the Mosaic Law? So by effect asking, is sin for angels the same as sin in the Mosaic Law? Okay. Now here goes the term relative. Relative. Considered in relation or in proportion to something. Comparative, respective, comparable, correlative, parallel. Existing or possessing a specified characteristic only in comparison to something else. Not absolute, right? So this is not universal. Universal is absolute or fixed. Actually, those terms are maybe a little bit different. We're thinking about relativism versus universalism. All right. It's actually universal is kind of is synonymous with absolute. We're thinking about absolute is what's fixed. Is there a fixed set of, is sin, the notion of sin, or what is considered sin, fixed from one instance to another, from one culture to another? So we're thinking about Israel versus those under the Israelite law and those under the Mosaic law. I'm sorry, Israelite law versus the Noahide law. All right. 2, this is grammar definition, music definition. Noun, a person connected by blood or marriage, doesn't apply. Let's check out philosophy. A term, thing, or concept that is dependent on something else. So if it's relative to something, it depends on that thing. So if we think of sin, and I argue that sin is relative to the law that you're held accountable to. So Israelites are held accountable to the Mosaic Law. The term or thing or concept that is dependent on something else. The term sin is dependent on the law of Moses. In order to know what sin is, you need to know what the law of Moses is, because the law of Moses will define sin for you. Okay? So so that we are complete in our discussion, I'm just going to go over quickly the definitions of righteousness, but we'll look at the biblical definitions, but these are some secular definitions. Righteousness, the quality of being morally right or justifiable. Sin, an immoral act considered to be a transgression against divine law. We'll look at that. An immoral act considered to be a transgression against divine law. So if we look at sin, you can already see that by definition, sin is a relative term. A term, thing, or concept that is dependent on something else. Look at sin. A term, an immoral act, dependent on the divine law. It's a transgression of the divine law. So you need a divine law in order to determine a behavior or conduct that's transgression. If you have no law, these kind of just fall away, right? And that really kind of mirrors what Paul says when he says, "I had not known what sin was except for the law." All right, so sin is a relative term. Let's go over the biblical definitions, and we'll discuss why Christians, especially in the Rumble Room, have been really missing this argument. They are missing it, and I think they are. It's by necessity that they're doing this. Okay, so let's talk about it. 1 John 3:4. Whoever committeth sin transgresseth also the law, for sin is transgression of the law. Deuteronomy. And it shall be our righteousness if we observe to do all these commandments before the Lord our God, as he hath commanded us. So the Israelites, we believe in the continuity of these terms. For us, the law, transgression, what law John's talking about is very clear and hardly needs an explanation, because we presume that it is from the Mosaic Law. And the Mosaic Law is essentially the converse, states the converse. It tells us what righteousness is. Okay? Deuteronomy 6:25. And it shall be our righteousness if we observe to do all these things, all these commandments before the Lord our God, as he hath commanded us. So righteousness is observing the commandments. Righteousness is observing the commandments. Okay? And sin is transgression of what was commanded, which is the law, the divine law. Okay, as we saw in Google, the Google Dictionary definition. Now, so that we are complete in our rationale, Hebrews have reason to believe that in the New Testament era, during the New Testament narrative, when 1 John 3:4 was written, okay, that the law was that which was given to Moses. And if we look in Luke 2:20 through 23, okay, this is talking about when Christ was born. He was circumcised according to the law. Joseph and Mary observed the law. Okay. And when the days of purification, her purification, Mary's purification according to the law of Moses were accomplished, they brought him, the Messiah, to Jerusalem to present him to the Lord. Okay. 23, as it is written in the law of the Lord, every male that openeth the womb shall be called holy to the Lord. So here we are talking about Mary accomplishing her purification of Moses, and they brought the Messiah to present him on the 8th day according to the law of Moses. This references Levitical law. Okay. It references a Levitical law, the law of circumcision. Okay, on the 8th day, every male is to be circumcised. Okay, and then also it references, it calls the Mosaic Law of the Lord. Okay, and it cites the scripture that says, every male that openeth the womb shall be called holy to the Lord. So every firstborn male is dedicated unto the Lord. Okay. All right. So we have reason. We have reason and warrant to believe that there's continuity from Old Testament writings to New Testament writings. Now, a Christian may say, "Oh, well, that was before the ascension of the Messiah." Well, we see also in the book of Acts that the disciples in Acts 2 were observing the day of Pentecost. They also, I believe in Acts 20, verse 6, they were observing the Feast of Unleavened Bread. So again, you have these scriptural proofs that the disciples, the Israelites, were still observing the Mosaic Law. And so thus, if the Mosaic Law is still being observed, then we can stand with certainty and a surety that that the concepts of righteousness and sin that are of the Mosaic Law, that are derived in the Mosaic Law, still stand. All right. All right. So when we're talking about Christians, when we're discussing sin and righteousness with them, this is ample case. And so Christians argue that sin is a universal idea. But there's a problem with that. Because if sin is universal, then what is sin defined as? And in Google Dictionary, sin is a transgression against a divine law. What divine law? Christians need to be able to state that. What divine law? They'll say the law of God. Well, isn't the law of God the Mosaic Law? Okay. Now obviously God didn't. It would be a tough case. It would be a tough case to make the argument that the Mosaic Law is the same law that was given to Noah. Okay. I wouldn't argue that. I would accept that, there was perhaps a slightly different law given to. I would accept that. I would agree to that. I mean, Noah was demonstrated sacrificing clean, foul, and unclean, and Genesis made that distinction. So that could be. What I'm saying is, it wouldn't be a slam dunk unless you have some other sort of text to sort of confirm that, hey, Noah had some version of the Passover, some version of Feast of First Fruits and Tabernacles, so on and so forth. But given the text, given the canonical text, it would be really tough to make that case. So if the Christians want that, that's fine. Fine. Let's grant that Noah was given a different law, and then there was a slightly different law or different law to whatever degree that Israelites were given. All right. But one thing to keep in mind is that sin is transgression of the law. Now we know that Israelites were given a law. They were given a law, a specific law. So all the notions of righteousness and sin are relative to that law. The notion of righteousness and sin depend on the divine law that was given to them at Sinai. Okay? So with that, it really there's logical coherency, there's validity, it's sound, but what the Christians are left to, and they make, I believe they make this argument, they make their argument by necessity, because once if they don't have a universal idea of law, then they have to accept that John 3:4 is referring to the Mosaic Law. The only problem is, the only out they have is that John's not explicitly stating that sin is transgression of the Mosaic Law. But what Israelites argue, what we argue, is that John was an Israelite, and he studied under, he was the disciple of the greatest Torah teacher on the planet Earth, which was the Messiah. All right, so why wouldn't his definition of the law and definition of sin be transgression of the Mosaic Law? Why wouldn't he have a reference to the law? He's an Israelite. He grew up under the Mosaic Law. Okay, why wouldn't he? Why wouldn't his definition? Why would that not be his frame of reference? Ask that to a Christian. Why wouldn't the law of Moses be John's frame of reference? Most of the time they'll say, well, sin existed before the Mosaic Law. Okay, well, why would John, then you ask them, why would John be referencing any other law except that of his nation, which was Israel? Why would he be referencing any other law besides the Mosaic Law? Then you get in this argument of they divide the law, the Mosaic Law, which is a first in my experience as a Christian. It's a first for me to see Christians do that, because even when I was a Christian, I never heard Christians do that. They say, "Oh, they're in the law of Moses. There are some laws that are moral, and there are some laws that aren't." I mean, that's essentially what they're saying, right? Like, if there is some laws that are moral that translate to the New Testament, then what are the other laws that don't? Are they immoral laws? Are they immoral laws? All right. So then that creates a very complicated situation for Christians. You see the loose ends? And so typically at this point, what you'll get is a lot of runaround, avoidance, and shifting. And at that point, there's no need to get upset, because they've completely been frustrated. You can let them talk, and at this point, they'll probably hang themselves or make themselves look pretty silly, especially if they're being recorded. All right, so let's see. Now, when we talk about law and morality, all right, it's my impression that every law has a moral base. All right, laws guide behavior. Laws guide behavior conduct. And so, depending on what your moral values are for that nation, you're going to design your laws accordingly. Okay? And so we know that the Father said, "Be holy as I am holy." All right? So he has an idea. He gave us a law. He has an idea of how we should be, of what he wants to shape us to be. He said, I made you to be a peculiar people, unique people unto me. You're a royal priesthood, a holy nation. Okay? So his idea is how his laws are are derived from his idea of what we should be. All right, he's our king, he's our father. You know, the father shapes the character of the child. Israel is his child, his chosen. All right, so the idea that some laws would be moral and that those would only translate after, those would only stand after the ascension of Christ, and not the others, the sacrifices. That's problematic, and you can't blame them. That's what Hebrews and Paul says. And I see a lot of Israelites get mixed up when they, then the argument gets a little bit muddy, because now we have Israelites giving a defense for why sacrifice is over with. But sacrifice was part of the law. We know that the law is whole. If you offend one part of the law, you offend another. We know that Levitical priests are part of the law. So the Levitical priests go hand in hand with the law. They can never be done away with. And if you take one part of the law away, you take the whole law away. James says if you offend on one part of the law, you have offended the whole thing. It's James chapter 2, no? All right, so how is it one portion of the law is gone and one portion stands? Without you sort of doing this rhetorical acrobatics. The priest, the order of Melchizedek. We won't get into that. Melchizedek wasn't written into the law anywhere in Leviticus or Deuteronomy or any of the books of Moses. We know about Melchizedek. We know David talked about Melchizedek, but it doesn't make any ordinance. There's no ordinance for Melchizedek in the Mosaic Law. And if we're supposed to be getting back to the law, statutes, and commandments, then we can expect that the Levitical priesthood will return. The Levitical priests are scattered. Your Levitical priests are scattered. You can't sacrifice. Okay, but we know by Jeremiah 33. All right, we know by Malachi chapter 3, 1 through 7. We know that by Ezekiel 40, 43, and 44, that the Levitical priests will return. So we don't have to get involved with Hebrews. I'm advising you that it's not beneficial for you, because if you allow Hebrews, if you allow its efficacy and you don't reject it, you're going to have to justify why Hebrews is saying your Levitical priests are gone. Why half or a portion of your Levitical law that you have to be getting back to is gone now, and then it gets to be a muddy mess. When you argue Paul, it's very muddy. When he allows that for the existence of a gospel of uncircumcision, you have just violated the hallmark signature law of your covenant, circumcision. So now when you agree with Paul, you're stuck with justifying why Paul is permitting uncircumcision. So these are hitches that your argument's going to get caught on. Now, if you want to eliminate those difficulties, you have reason to. It's not an arbitrary, like, oh, I feel like just because this will help me win an argument, I'll not agree with Paul or Hebrews. No, you have reason to. And I just explained all the reasons why you can reject Paul and Hebrews. And I advise you to. But don't expect to really be able to make your case, make an open and shut case when you're trying to defend why sacrifices are gone, and at the same time you're still arguing that you need to get back to the law, statutes, and commandments. All right. Let's see what else I wanted to cover before. I think we covered everything. Yeah, we covered all the responses for Christians. So sin and righteousness are relative to the law of Moses. So when an Israelite John says, whoever committed sin transgresses also the law, he's saying, whoever committed sin according to the law transgresseth the law of Moses. What law? The law of Moses that was given at Sinai. For sin is transgression of the law of Moses. And you can sort of watch this video over to learn the rationale. 1 second, Jephthah. I'll open it up for sure. I just want to make sure I covered everything. Okay, I think. Okay, we'll do a little dialoguing. Okay, Jephthah, what's up? Regards to universalism and relativism, what's up? So just for the audiences, so that the audience knows, Jephthah is a Christian, and I hope I'm pronouncing your name right, Jephthah. I don't know if it's Japhet or Jephthah, but feel free to correct me. So I'm just waiting on your question. Not sure if it's lagging or if it's messing with you. Have you ever heard somebody say all will be saved because scripture states that every knee will bow? Well, when it says every knee will bow, does it mean that all will be saved? Are you arguing that? Because, well, okay, so when I say all will be saved, cite that scripture for me. All will be saved. Qualify. Every human, every tongue will come. Well, okay, so put it this way: regardless of if a person is not a believer or whether they are, they will bow. They will bow. They will bow. But we know that not everybody is. Not everybody believes that Jesus, that the Messiah is Lord. Not everybody ascribes him what's due. Yeah. So in the end of judgment, of course they're going to recognize the sovereignty of the Messiah. If us Israelites believe that he is king, that he will be king, that it's he who will reign, it's something you kind of have to resign yourself to. You gotta believe that yourself. That's by default. But we know that there is an elect, and that elect is called by the Father, and that the Father gives those to the Messiah. All right, we know that not all will be saved. It's because they don't want to be. All right. When we talk about the tribulation, many Christians don't really understand what the tribulation is for. Many Christians do not understand that. They just know that it's going to come. But, as a Christian, I never knew. I was like, why there got to be a tribulation, man? That's going to suck. But there are books that give context, that give that give context for it. There's a reason why the tribulation is happening. And there's a reason why, like Jacob, of course, will be judged. Give me a second. There's a reason why Jacob will be judged, but definitely Jacob's not the only one that will be judged. All the nations will be judged. Stewardship of the creation. I know you don't believe in the efficacy, or I know you don't believe in the book of Ezra, but Second Ezra talks about the tribulation being a scourge to correct human behavior. It's your chance. Things are supposed to get so bad. Things are supposed to get so bad that you're supposed to look up. This is the Creator's last way of getting your attention. Do I hold a future or present tribulation? That's a pretty tricky thing to answer. I mean, do I believe the tribulation is now? Possibly. It seems like a lot of things are happening. It doesn't seem like everything is happening. If you look to the news, it wouldn't seem at all. Maybe it would. I don't know. I think those who believe that the tribulation is now have ample reason to believe, but I don't think everything's been accomplished. So, has it started? Are we in the middle? How far are we in the middle of it? That becomes a conversation that, I mean, I can't even. That's something I'm still sort of mulling around. It definitely seems like it. I know. For me personally, it seems like it. But when we talk about those who will receive a mark on their head and hand, like, that's starting to happen. That's already happened I heard one Christian apologist explain it, that receiving a mark on your head is how you think, and receiving a mark on your hand is what you do. It signifies what you do. So if what you think and what you do reflects that of a satanic mindset, or when we talk about satanic, what is satanic? That which, do what thou wilt, that which does not acknowledge God, that which does not acknowledge Elohim. Okay, then you have a case, right? But as far as like literal, I believe in a literal mark. I believe in a literal mark, and the marks have happened before. I think when the Israelites had gone into slavery to the Greeks in Ptolemy in Egypt. All right, that's a little nugget for all the listeners. When they had been sold to the Grecians as slaves to Egypt under Ptolemy, okay, they had, I think around that time, that may be in that story or maybe in another, just before they had gone through a lot of trouble, as a culture, they were receiving marks of Dionysus, an ivy leaf on their hand. All right, that's a little nugget. I think that might be in Maccabees 2 or 3. That might be in the second or third Maccabees. Yeah, okay, sure, thanks, man. But let's see. Aside from that, I think that covers it all. If there's anybody else that has a question, no problem. I think for my upcoming live streams, I definitely want to do a read through of Hebrews, and to sort of talk about all the reasons why one should reject Hebrews. Maybe Paul, I'll do some read-throughs of Paul, and we'll really dissect the scriptures of why, basically the premise is Paul in Hebrews makes statements that conflict with the testimony of the law and prophets. They're making statements that conflict with the testimony of the law and prophets. Statements that aren't founded in the law and prophets. Okay, so you guys can look forward to that. Also, just wanted to share I got this in the news. I got this in the news today. I got this in the mail. Tudor parfaits black Jews in Africa and the Americas. Something to make all you Christians poop your pants. And I'll just go through. Let's see. Do a little feather through. Skim through the pages. Let's put this up. That's more light. Black Jews in Africa and the Americas. All you Christians can poop your pants. Black Jews in Africa and America. It's Harvard Unity Press. All right, guys. So this is not your Amazon private print. You know, I didn't know Tudor Parfit didn't type this up on his computer and privately distribute it through Amazon. He went through publishers. So Harvard University, they reviewed his literature, and and that's a big deal. Publishing is a big deal. It's Harvard University right here. And they distributed it. They're distributing it for him. Okay? Alright, so I'm gonna be reading this in the next couple of weeks, and you guys can bet that I will be reading and sharing and screenshotting and highlighting. Look at that. You Christians can poop your pants. Take that, Matt Sally. Take that, Jafet. Take that, Lasagna. Take that, Salam and Rachel James, Brian Garcia. Take that. Take that. All right, so it's Harvard here. It's Harvard talking now. Just put this up so you guys can read it yourselves. You guys can read it yourselves. Just pause the screen. Oh man, my bad. All right, Jeff. Hey, but how do you say it though? Can you put a phonetic spelling of your name up? Is it Jephthah or is it Japhet? Can you just? I mean, I promise when I learn it, I probably won't butcher it anymore. All right, and we'll let's see. We got some statements here. Moving from lost tribes in Africa to black Jews in the United States, and from the biblical narrative to modern genetic testing, to the Parfit traces with verve and insight that the ties that bind blacks and Jews in history and myth. A cogent and enlightening account of a pan-historical and international subject fraught with serious religious, racial, and cultural implications. It's K. Kaufman Chalamet from Harvard University. Anyone interested in understanding how and why discussions of Africana Judaisms have such vast and varied participants, from Orthodox rabbis to Pan-Africanist icons, from mouth-swabbing geneticists to human rights advocates, will find the answers in this masterful new offering from one of the world's most knowledgeable scholars on the topic, John L. Jackson, author of Real Black Adventures in Racial Sincerity. So those are some big ups. All right. So you guys can look forward to me posting. All right. Jeff did. Okay, I got you. Cool. All right. Got you, Jeff did. I'll call you Jeff. All right, guys. I think we covered it. I will see you on the comment boards. Hit me up. Feel free to watch this video as many times as you like. Ask as many questions as you want. And I'll be here to trade ideas with you. For those watching from YouTube, feel free to join us, Biblical Rumble Room, the Biblical Rumble Room on Facebook. Just type that in and look for the bronze gloves. All right. I hope you guys have a fantastic rest of the evening. I will see you on the comment boards. All right. Peace and light.